The first time I met Lorraine Sandwell, she was standing on my lawn holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. Her sunglasses were oversized, her voice shrill, and her blonde bob haircut looked like it had been sharpened instead of styled. "You can't park that thing in your driveway," she said, jabbing her pen toward my boat like it had personally offended her. I crossed my arms. "It's not a thing. It's a 21-foot bayliner and it's parked on my property." "I don't care if it's the Queen Mary," she snapped. "Per the HOA bylaws, boats aren't allowed in driveways. It disrupts neighborhood aesthetics." I looked at her, then at the boat, then back at her. "Funny. The bylaws say boats may not be parked for more than 72 consecutive hours. It's been here for 2, I checked." Her nostrils flared. "Well, I find it visually disruptive. It's not in line with the community's standards." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean your standards?" "I am the vice president of the HOA," she said, like she was announcing royalty. I already knew that. Everyone in Willow Creek Estates knew Lorraine ran the HOA with an iron fist and a mouth that never stopped. She'd fined my neighbor for having too many wind chimes, and once made a retiree repaint his house because the beige was too yellow. "I'm not moving it," I said flatly. She scribbled something aggressively on her clipboard and stormed off without another word. The next morning, I found a violation notice duct taped to my front door, big red letters screaming "Second warning," even though there hadn't been a first. The fine, $200. For unauthorized nautical equipment. I laughed out loud. I knew my rights, and more importantly, I had the HOA bylaws printed, highlighted, and laminated in a folder in my office. I wasn't some pushover. My name's Derek Faulkner, and I've lived in this neighborhood for 6 years. I've dealt with worse than Lorraine Sandwell, but what she didn't know was that I was done playing defense. So I waited. I waited until Lorraine and her husband left for their weekly Thursday night trivia at the golf club. I hooked the bayliner to my truck and slowly backed it down the street. Then, like a gift from the HOA gods, I parked it perfectly right in front of Lorraine's pristine white Colonial. The next morning at 7 sharp, I was sipping coffee on my porch when I heard it, a screech, then stomping. Then Lorraine, barefoot in her robe, hair up in curlers, stomping toward me like an angry storm cloud. "Derek Faulkner," she shouted. "What the hell is your boat doing in front of my house?" I took another sip of coffee. 72 hours, Lorraine. I'm well within my rights. I held up the laminated bylaw page like a shield. "You know the rules." She went red in the face. "You're harassing me. I'll have you fined." "You can't fine me for following the rules," I said, calm as ever. "Besides, it's public street parking. The bylaws don't cover that." She stood there trembling, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then she spun around and marched back to her house. That would have been the end of it, except I underestimated just how far Lorraine and the HOA were willing to go. 3 days later, I came home to find my boat missing, and that's when things got serious. I stood in my driveway staring at the empty patch of concrete where my bayliner had been, my keys clenched so tight my knuckles had gone pale. The hitch lock lay discarded in the grass, its shank twisted like licorice. Whoever took the boat hadn't even tried to be subtle. I didn't waste time calling Lorraine. This was beyond her usual paper-pushing pettiness. I called the county sheriff. Deputy Connor showed up 20 minutes later, a young guy with a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses. He listened while I laid it all out, from the bogus fine to the boat vanishing off public property. "You got security footage?" he asked without emotion. "Back camera faces the street," I said, already walking toward the side gate. "It's motion activated, caught everything from midnight to 6. We watched the video on my laptop at the kitchen counter. At 3:42 a.m., a white pickup truck with no plates backed up to the boat. 2 men in gloves jumped out, broke the hitch lock in under a minute, and drove off like pros. Connor leaned back. "No plates, gloves, masks. This wasn't some neighborhood kid messing around." "I want to press charges," I said. "Oh, you'll need to. This is grand theft." "That boat's worth what, 25, 30 grand? 32, I said. "Plus electronics," he nodded. I'll file the report, but you might want to think about who in your life would be willing to commit a felony just to prove a point. I didn't have to think. I knew exactly who. I called the HOA office. The receptionist, Dana, sounded nervous the second she heard my voice. Is Lorraine in? I asked. She's in a meeting. Then tell her I'm filing police charges for theft of private property. Boat was stolen last night. Security footage has been turned over. A long pause. Then, I'll pass that along. I hung up without another word. If Lorraine thought this was still a game, she was about to learn what playing dirty actually meant. By 5, Deputy Connor returned with a warrant to canvass the neighborhood. He started with the Sandwell's house. I watched from across the street as Lorraine opened the door in full tennis gear, racket in hand, pretending she had no idea why the law was on her porch. It didn't take long. Lorraine refused a search, citing privacy rights. So Connor filed a request with the county judge and came back the next morning with a court order. By then, the neighborhood grapevine was already buzzing. Turns out, Lorraine's husband, Greg, kept an old aluminum fishing boat behind their shed. The HOA had always made exceptions for him, claiming it was grandfathered in. But now they had a reason to poke around. The search of their property didn't turn up my bayliner. But something else interesting came to light. A set of bolt cutters and a hydraulic jack stained with grease, hidden under a tarp in their garage, and a pair of gloves matching the ones from the video with a distinctive yellow stripe. Connor bagged everything. On Monday, I got a call from a local marine storage facility 20 minutes outside town. My boat had been towed there overnight by someone claiming to be from the HOA. They'd shown forged paperwork saying the boat was abandoned property, and they'd paid cash. No name, no ID left on file. I drove out there immediately. Sure enough, there she was, scratched along the hull, the electronics box pried open, speakers ripped clean out. I took photos of everything, signed retrieval paperwork, and had her towed back home. This time I parked her in the garage. I wasn't taking chances. Lorraine's face was a mask of forced neutrality the next time I saw her, but her eyes wouldn't stop twitching. "You've accused me of a federal crime," she said stiffly, stopping me at the mailbox. "I have spoken to my attorney." "You should," I said. "Mine already filed civil action." "You're looking at restitution, malicious property damage, conspiracy, and fraud, and that's before the criminal charges stick. You can't prove anything." "You're right," I said. "I can't, but the sheriff's office can. And so can the marine lot's security feed." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Also," I added, "your bylaws don't authorize towing at all. No HOA can remove private property from public space without city enforcement. You forged documents, that's prison time." She blinked rapidly. "I didn't. You gave the order," I said. "You signed the memo. I've got the scanned copy. Dana sent it to me by mistake. It even has your little signature with the looped L." That broke her composure. She turned on her heel and stormed off, but her pace wasn't confident anymore. It was frantic. By Thursday, Dana had quit. She left a handwritten letter in every neighbor's mailbox, detailing how Lorraine had pressured her into lying to police, forging internal memos, and manipulating votes during board elections. It was a bombshell. By Friday, I had a town hall scheduled at the community center. I brought printed copies of the HOA's actual bylaws, highlighted in neon. I passed out laminated timelines of the boat theft incident, complete with screenshots from the security footage and the towing yard records. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I just laid it all out: how the HOA had overstepped, how their vice president had likely committed felony theft, and how every homeowner had been placed at risk by the abuse of power. People were furious. Not just about my boat, but about everything. Fines they'd paid without question. Rules that seemed to change depending on who enforced them. A neighbor named Miguel stood up and said he'd been fined for repainting his deck without prior approval, even though the color matched the original exactly. Linda, from 2 doors down, brought up how Lorraine once threatened to escalate a complaint about her backyard garden unless she removed the sunflowers. Within 48 hours, we had 74 signatures, enough to trigger a full board review and force an emergency election. The county sheriff's office served a subpoena to the HOA headquarters the next Monday. Lorraine didn't show up to the next board meeting. Greg tried to speak on her behalf, but the crowd booed him off the stage. When he muttered something about neighbors lacking respect, someone in the back shouted, "Respect isn't stolen in the middle of the night." The board voted to suspend all enforcement actions pending a full audit. I was appointed interim compliance chair, mostly because no one else wanted the job and, frankly, I'd already done the legwork. I didn't take a salary. I didn't issue a single fine. But I did rewrite the entire enforcement policy with the help of a real estate attorney and a former judge who lived on our block. We added a transparent appeals process, mandatory photographic evidence for any violations, and a rotating oversight committee made up of regular homeowners. The sheriff's office formally charged Lorraine with falsifying legal documents and conspiracy to commit grand theft. She took a plea deal to avoid jail time and was barred from serving on any HOA board in the state for 10 years. My bayliners still got the scars from that night, but I left one of them unpainted, a long gouge near the stern. It reminds me what happens when people forget that power isn't authority and rules don't override the law. The HOA still exists, but now it actually serves the community. And Lorraine, she moved out 3 months later. The for sale sign went up quietly one morning, and by noon, someone threw a going-away party with a piñata shaped like a clipboard. We didn't ask who, but we all showed up. When the audit results came in, they were worse than anyone expected. I was called into a closed-door session with the county's HOA Oversight Committee, the auditor, and 2 attorneys from the state regulatory office. I'd expected to find out Lorraine had siphoned off maybe a few thousand in bogus fines or misallocated funds for landscaping projects that never happened. What I wasn't prepared for was the embezzlement trail. The auditor, a quiet man named Harold with a permanent squint, laid out a spreadsheet with columns of transactions dating back 3 years. Lorraine had been funneling money from the HOA's maintenance reserve into a separate shell account registered under the name WCE Neighborhood Improvement Trust. The account didn't belong to the HOA. It belonged to a business entity she'd created under her husband's name. Over $90,000 had disappeared. She'd written checks under fake vendor names for community enhancement initiatives that never occurred. There were supposed contracts for speed bump installations, tree trimming services, even a phantom security patrol. None of it existed. The attorney from the regulatory office, a woman named Camille with an expression like a stone wall, pointed to a highlighted line. "This invoice alone is for $22,000. It's supposedly for decorative fencing around the retention pond," she said. "There is no fence." "There never was." She submitted photos, I said. "In last year's annual report." Camille turned the page in her folder. "Digitally altered, stolen from another subdivision's website. We confirmed with the firm whose logo appeared in the corner." "They've never worked in this county." My stomach turned. "She used HOA funds to pay for a private tennis court surfacing," Harold added. "That invoice was disguised as surface drainage repair and signed off by a board vote that never happened. The worst part, no one had noticed." The board had rubber-stamped everything, trusting Lorraine's summaries and never requesting itemized breakdowns. She'd buried the paper trail behind jargon and bureaucracy. "What happens now?" I asked. Camille folded her hands. "The sheriff's office has already issued a warrant for financial fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement. Federal charges are pending. The county's freezing the HOA's accounts until new oversight procedures are implemented." "And the residents?" I said. "They've been paying inflated dues for years. They'll get restitution," she said. "Eventually, but it'll take time." I left the meeting and sat in my truck for a long while, watching a line of ants crawl along the dashboard. Lorraine hadn't just tried to control us. She'd stolen from us, smiling all the while, pretending she was protecting property values. That same afternoon, the sheriff arrested her at the Willow Creek tennis courts during a doubles match. She didn't go quietly. Someone posted a grainy phone video of her shouting about ungrateful neighbors and conspiracies, which went semi-viral in the local Facebook group. By the next morning, the HOA's office was sealed. A county-issued lock hung from the front door, and a notice had been taped to the glass window, citing official investigation in progress. Residents gathered in small clusters, whispering with wide eyes, finally realizing just how deep the rot had gone. I called for an emergency open forum meeting not in the community center, but at the high school auditorium down the road. Too many people had questions, and we needed a space big enough for everyone to speak. The room filled quickly. Folding chairs creaked under the weight of over 200 residents. Some stood in the aisles, holding printouts of their HOA fees or photos of fines they'd paid without question. I walked up to the podium with a folder under one arm and a bottle of water in the other. "I know none of us signed up for this," I began. "We bought homes expecting peace, not politics, but it turns out we all let one person twist the rules because we thought it was easier than fighting back." I held up the folder. "This is the full report from the auditors, every misused dollar. Every forged vote, every lie disguised as policy, but what matters now is what we do next." A man near the front stood up. "What about the board? They let this happen. Are they being held accountable too?" "They've all resigned," I said. "Every last one of them submitted letters this morning. And we'll be holding a full election in 30 days, this time with oversight from a third-party mediator." A woman in the back raised her hand. "Will we get our money back?" "Eventually," I said, "once the court processes are complete. But in the meantime, I've submitted a proposal to suspend all future dues until the accounts are unfrozen. No more fines, no more threats. We're hitting pause." The room erupted in applause. After the forum, I was approached by a former city planner named Alyssa. She lived near the golf course and had quietly watched everything unfold without ever getting involved. Now, she held out a thick binder labeled Zoning and Local Governance. "I think you'll want this," she said. "Some of the HOA's enforcement policies conflict with county zoning laws. If you're rewriting the rulebook, you'll want this as ammo." I shook her hand. "Welcome to the committee." Over the next few weeks, we held workshops in people's garages and backyards, rewriting the bylaws from scratch. No more vague language, no more loopholes. We built a system where no single person could wield unchecked power. Every enforcement action required a public hearing. Every dollar spent had to be accounted for in a monthly bulletin, and we didn't stop there. We submitted a petition to the county council requesting formal oversight for all HOAs in the region. Too many neighborhoods had stories like ours, just quieter, buried under fear or complacency. Within 2 months, the council passed an ordinance requiring annual third-party audits and limiting board tenure to 2 consecutive terms. Willow Creek became the poster child for reform. The Bayliner, now fully repaired, sat in my driveway again, but this time, not as a symbol of defiance. It was just a boat. No one complained. No one issued warnings. It was just another part of a neighborhood that had finally remembered how to breathe. One afternoon, as I was washing it down, a kid rode past on his scooter and stopped at the edge of the lawn. "Hey," he said. "My dad said you took down the HOA lady." I wiped my hands on a towel. "Sort of," he nodded, impressed. "Cool." Then he zoomed off again. That night, I fired up the grill and invited over some neighbors. Not for a celebration, just burgers and laughter. No agendas, no speeches. Just people on porches again, where they belonged. The last thing I did before turning in was walk out to the mailbox. Inside was a plain, unmarked envelope. No return address, just a single piece of paper inside. "Thank you for reminding us this is our neighborhood too." No signature. I folded it carefully and slid it into the folder with the rest of the documentation. Not because I needed proof. but because it reminded me what mattered more than bylaws or elections or even justice: ownership, not of property but of place. We'd taken it back. The final weeks of Lorraine's unraveling brought out something I hadn't expected: the quiet strength of people who'd been underestimated for years. It started with a knock on my door one evening just after sunset. I opened it to find Mr. Harwood from 3 houses down, standing there in a faded navy windbreaker and holding a manila envelope. "Didn't know who else to give this to," he said, pushing it into my hands. "You'll know what to do." Inside were photocopies of handwritten notes, emails, and internal memos, some dating back nearly 5 years. Harwood had served briefly on the HOA's Architectural Review Committee before Lorraine had forced him out for questioning her discretionary spending. He'd kept everything. Most damning was a string of email exchanges between Lorraine and a contractor named Ray Dempsey. The emails laid out a scheme to inflate service invoices for tree removal projects, then split the overages. One message even included Lorraine's bank routing number, followed by a casual, "Just make it look like a donation to the Holiday Lights Fund." I brought the documents straight to Camille at the county regulatory office. She didn't even sit down this time. Just flipped through the pages, jaw locked tight. "This is felony-level wire fraud," she said. "And it crosses into federal territory misappropriation of funds involving public utility contractors. That's interstate commerce." The next morning, 2 black subs rolled into Willow Creek Estates. Plainclothes agents from the State Financial Crimes Division knocked on doors, not asking but informing. Lorraine was arrested again, this time on federal charges. No pretense of dignity this round. They walked her out in cuffs with her tennis visor still on. The silence after that was dense. No gossip, no speculation. Just the breeze rustling the oaks and the sound of a neighborhood realizing it had been complicit through indifference. At the next forum, I didn't speak first. I let Alyssa take the microphone. She stood in front of the crowd with a calm, deliberate posture. "We've all seen what unchecked authority looks like," she said. "Now let's build something we can be proud of." We passed a motion to dissolve the existing HOA charter entirely, not amend it, dismantle it. The entire structure had been built around centralized control, and we weren't interested in patching rotted wood. We wanted a new foundation. We formed a temporary advisory council with rotating members and strict term limits, no more than 6 months per member. Every meeting was public. Every vote recorded. Every expenditure published online. Alyssa spearheaded the drafting of a new community agreement, a simplified, readable document written in plain language. No legalese. No hidden clauses. It covered basic shared property maintenance and mutual courtesy standards. Nothing about aesthetics. Nothing about what color your front door could be, and it wasn't mandatory. Each homeowner could choose whether or not to sign. Those who opted in received community support for shared services like snow removal or bulk trash pickup. Those who didn't. No fines, no harassment. Just neighbors living side by side. Surprisingly, almost everyone opted in. Not because they were pressured, but because it finally felt like a choice. About a week after the new charter passed, Dana reached out. She'd been laying low for months, still shaken from the mess Lorraine had dragged her into. But now she seemed lighter, relieved. "I found something while clearing out the old HOA office," she said, handing me a flash drive. "It's kind of a time capsule." The files included audio recordings from board meetings that had never been made public, many of them from years back. One, in particular, caught my attention. Lorraine's voice, sharp and confident, filled the room. "Look, if we let people start questioning enforcement, it's over. They'll walk all over us. You have to keep them afraid, make the rules feel bigger than they are. That's how you keep order." We played the recording at the final town hall before the full dissolution. No commentary, just hit play and let the sound carry. The room sat in stunned silence afterward. No one needed to be told what it meant. It confirmed everything we'd experienced in one single, arrogant declaration. That night, the last of the HOA signs came down. The office was turned into a community workshop space. Local kids painted murals on the outside walls. One depicted a giant hand dropping a clipboard into a shredder. I didn't ask who painted it, but I left it up. The Bayliner got a new home too. I built a custom boat shelter beside the garage with help from Miguel and a retired carpenter named June. We worked through the weekends, sharing beers and stories, finally getting to know each other beyond nods and waves. One afternoon, as we were putting the finishing touches on the roof, June glanced over and said, "You know, this place feels different now." I wiped sweat from my brow. "Yeah. It feels like it belongs to us again," he nodded. "Took a boat to fix a neighborhood, never would have guessed." Weeks passed. The court case against Lorraine moved forward. The evidence was airtight. She accepted a plea deal that included jail time, full restitution, and permanent disqualification from holding any governance role tied to residential communities. A civil suit followed, and the restitution fund began slowly reimbursing homeowners who'd been fined under false pretenses. It wasn't everything they were owed, but it was justice in motion. One afternoon, I walked past the old tennis courts and saw a group of teenagers playing pickup volleyball. No HOA badge checker, no clipboard-wielding enforcer, just kids having fun. Linda had turned her sunflower patch into a full community garden. People donated seeds, tools, even compost. She posted a sign that read, "No rules, just growth." And the retention pond, we finally fenced it, for real, but we used donations from a weekend cookout fundraiser. Alyssa's husband welded the gate himself, and the fence posts were painted by local elementary school kids. At the very end of summer, we held a neighborhood celebration. No formal speeches, no ribbon cutting, just food trucks, music, and a dunk tank someone convinced Greg Sandwell to sit in. He'd stayed in town, quietly, keeping to himself since the fallout. But that day he showed up, got dunked multiple times, and laughed along with everyone else. It was the first time in years that no one looked over their shoulder when they laughed too loud or parked slightly crooked. Later that evening, as I was packing up folding chairs, Alyssa came over with 2 lemonades in hand. "You ever think it'd turn out like this?" she asked. I shook my head. "Thought I was just being petty, parking a boat to prove a point." "You did more than that," she said. "You reminded people that power doesn't come from a title, it comes from everyone standing up at once." We clinked cups. As the sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long gold shadows over the neighborhood, I glanced back at the street. No security patrols, no violation notices, no fear. Just porches filled with people, gardens blooming, wind chimes singing in the breeze. The kind of place where nobody needed a laminated rulebook to be a good neighbor. Just a little courage and a boat to break the spell.